WestWorld Season 2. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm going to give it to you straight because that's how we roll. I stopped watching it halfway through. I made it through 5 episodes and I realized something. I was sitting in front of my TV, completely bored, constantly feeling the urge to pick up my phone. That third episode with James Delos, third or fourth episode with James Delos, where sort of showing him get reanimated and coming back to the real world.
Yeah.
That was a very well-written episode. It was very artistic. It had a human element to it. More like that. Then the next week, we go over...
Samurai world.
We go to the samurai world. And it's like... You're stacking it up against me. You know? It's like a bunch of characters that I don't know, speaking a language that I don't speak, talking about a lot of shit that I don't care about. And it just felt like homework. And then I go over to the YouTube and I watch my bud Alt-Shift-X. I watch him explain it all, and the way that he puts together his explanation videos are phenomenal. He basically creates a giant image and just pans and scans through all of the characters. And at the end, there's the reveal of the giant, mess that he's been telling you a story inside of. And I realized I don't want to spend an hour of my life watching these shows, bored, waiting for something to happen. So then I just started watching the recaps. And I've never done this before in my life. Sean, this is my theory where it went wrong, and I'd love to hear your theory.
Okay. Go on.
Here's where it went wrong. Too many side stories at once. Too many timelines at once. With so much going on, so many bits and bops, so many characters that I don't really emotionally care about. I couldn't understand the stakes. I didn't know what I was rooting for. I couldn't find me in the art. Like I couldn't find someone that I could relate to because all these people are thirsty for power and they're looking to kill others. So if it's a human that just wants to rape and murder, I don't want to rape and murder. But if it's a robot that wants to try to save themselves and is willing to rape, well, they don't rape, but they murder. It's just a bunch of people that want to kill each other. That's not very relatable to me. That episode that I said that was beautiful, that was beautiful because it was somebody trying to grip their mortality. It was the idea that I want to live forever. And he was also trying to fight to win, to prove that this build of his subconscious in a robot body was worthy of going on. There were stakes in there. There were emotional stakes in there. If it's just people killing people for power, that doesn't translate to me.
Yeah. I mean, we have talked about this and I 100% agree. I think, going through the rest of the show, it's like I cannot get on board when literally any of the characters could be and probably is a robot.
Right.
I can't do it. I'm not saying that I need the protagonist to not be a robot. I'm fine with the protagonist being a robot.
Right.
You can't set them up to be one thing and then expect us to care. I think that they did a really good job in the first season getting us to care about Dolores.
Yes.
And then the second season, what the fuck happened?
Okay, so
she became this like supervillain that you weren't interested in.
Here's the thing. In the first season, they had the element of surprise on us. So we were watching characters in different timelines, but we didn't all exactly know that we were watching characters in different timelines. So like we didn't know that there was 2 versions of William sort of emotionally wrestling with himself.
Yeah.
In this next season, season 2, they just made it complicated for the sake of making it complicated. Like around episode 6 or 7, they introduce like as if 4 different timelines and 8 different side stories isn't enough for you to keep up with. Then they introduce the concept of the cradle, which is a world inside the world, which is existing in a subconscious level.
Which they had to release a documentary like a 10-minute featurette to get anybody to understand it, which you should not have to watch a special feature to understand something that they do. Like they haven't done their job in storytelling if they're having to release something extra that nobody's going to see.
Right.
That's fucking that's storytelling 101 for me. It's like you can't make those mistakes.
So let's backtrack for a moment from a story that's way too complicated and too clever for its own good. What we can all learn from this as creatives is the general public doesn't care about extra lines in your artwork. The general public doesn't care about fancy edits in your YouTube video. And the general public doesn't care how many layers are in your SoundCloud hip hop song. People care about story and relatability. If you forget to tell a good story and if you forget to add relatability, it doesn't matter how slick your podcast is. It doesn't matter how great your production is. It doesn't matter how many lines are in your art or how many layers are in your music. If it doesn't have a chorus, we can't sing along. And they completely forgot that in this series. Now, I kept watching these videos, these recap videos, because part of me was curious in the way that you're curious. Like, I think these cops are going to crack this guy over the head. I want to see him get hit. Like, it was a bizarre curiosity. 100%. This gets into that category. If I don't have this job, I just walk away from this and just let it burn behind me. Because I do have this job, I was curious to see where it went, how they did it. But I have to tell you, I don't feel like I really missed out on anything by just watching 10 or 12 minute summary reviews, just because that's not how I want to spend my time anymore. I don't want to spend an hour being like, oh shit, so is this now or is this in the mainland in Bernard's home? Like, when there's 8 different versions of Bernard, all of a sudden I stopped caring. When they took Dolores and planted her inside that woman, Charlotte, no, I'm done.
Yep.
I'm done because there's no relatable factor in there. There's no, I watch TV to escape from my life. I love to watch TV in the morning because it recharges my creative battery. And if TV takes me someplace emotional, if it reminds me of an emotional moment in my life, or if it takes me someplace inspirational, then I feel like the journey was worth it. If I watch an hour of riddles and same characters but different languages and Ghost Nation, you never knew what Ghost Nation was doing, and the whole like, and you look back at it, the samurai part of the story was for nothing.
Well, I mean, it wasn't, but yeah, what it actually served for me was a negative purpose, because it made the one character that you seem to care about in this series, or I seem to care about in this series, was Maeve. Tandy Newton's character, and her backstory with her daughter, who she was trying to capture. But the samurai story actually seemed to make that into, oh well, Maeve's just programmed to be like that, and there's other people who have the same story, and you don't care about it, and it just made me care less about it. What I'm going to speak about now is Blade Runner, the new Blade Runner movie, because I feel like it's almost. I was thinking the other day, like there was nothing that was going to make me care about Westworld. It's all about robots. I don't care about robots, and it's all about, like, everybody has the same story, and they've used it over multiple different plot lines, and then there's people who think that they're special, but then they find out that they're not special. And I was like, I'm never going to care about any of those people. But Blade Runner 2049, that only came out a year ago, was basically had the exact same plot as that. It's about a robot,
right,
or a replicant that has that thinks that they're special, and it turns out that it's not special. And actually, what happened in Blade Runner was they made me care about characters, and they made me care about robots, and they made me emotionally invested in people that you wouldn't expect to be. And it's like, oh, is Deckard a replicant? Is this person a replicant? And ultimately, it didn't really matter, because you cared anyway, and it was a beautiful looking thing, but it also had story beats that just made me care. Whereas So it is possible to do it. It's just that WestWorld didn't do it.
No.
Whenever they had the chance to pull you back in, they did the opposite.
Pushed you away.
Back out. Yeah, because there was the Ghost Nation episode that was absolutely beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful episodes of TV ever. But ultimately, it didn't really mean anything. It was highlighting a character that you were never going to see again. It was an episode that pulled me out in the same way that episode of Stranger Things pulled me out, where they went on that little side quest. And it happens in all of these. And it felt as though they were, like you said, like being too clever for their own good. It was like they were trying to... I think they were probably pissed off that people figured out what happened in the last series. So they were like... Because, the people on Reddit and people on 4chan seemed to figure out that we were dealing with two timelines and two different Williams. And I think that they were like, well, good luck figuring this one out. And they tied themselves up in knots just to be too clever. And that's, again, we can speak about our own work, and we can talk about, like, work as a designer or work as, an artist. And you shouldn't be overthinking these things.
Right.
It's like, just tell a coherent story and do what you were doing. Like, I was exhausted at the end of the first season of Westworld, but I was mostly in. I got what they tried to do. They didn't try to make it too complicated, but it was complicated enough. And I was mostly in. And instead what happened is they just went completely crazy and down one side that I just wasn't prepared to go in. And it's not just me who isn't prepared to do it. It's you, and it's a bunch of other people who are just like, I'm out. This show has cost so much money. Nobody watches it. It's going to get one more season at the most. I think that they killed all of the characters that they killed because they don't really have a budget for the next season, and they're just trying to make it smaller. I just think that it seems the writing's on the wall for it now, and all because they couldn't just let it lie. They needed to kind of like keep scratching that itch, which is crazy to me.
It's a common mistake that creatives make where you put too much into something because you think that people will appreciate the hard work and the complexity, but you end up missing the relatability. So
yeah,
let's backtrack. If this season would have been boiled down to Dolores and Teddy trying to figure out, is there a way to liberate themselves in the name of love, right? Like, maybe if we can become real, our love can become real. That would be a really great story that we can all relate to, but it also stays under the guard of Westworld. If William and his daughter could have had a better, clear conflict of, he's been in this world because he feels like he broke his life in the outer world, and his daughter is just trying to chase the love of a dad. That's relatable.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
And then over the top of it, if we would have had James Delos or...
Yeah, Delos.
Delos, thank you.
That's the company, yeah.
And then if playing in the background, we had the idea of wrestling with mortality. Those three stories with an occasional little side story that pays off, that would be great. If you want to put Maeve and her daughter in there, we needed to see an episode early where it was all the good times with her daughter and how much she loved this daughter. And we also needed to see something from the daughter's eyes. But that would be it for me. If I was in the writer's room, I'd be like, we're stocked here at 4 major stories. But think about those 4 stories. I'm talking about love, the love of a parent, and the feeling of rejection and the feeling of fucking up your life, dealing with mortality, and trying to seek something that you may never get. That is 4 very relatable narratives that you could weave around 8 or 10 episodes and make people feel like they went to this amusement park, they went to another world. You could wrap technology around those 4 themes. That's 4 great themes that I just spit out. Sean, what were the themes that we actually saw?
I've no idea. I couldn't tell you, because all they did is just wrap everything up in extra layers of craziness. So you talk about William, the man in black. Like, at the end of the first season, it kind of related to him. He felt as though everything had gone crazy. He was a man out of time. Yeah. And it felt like the world had opened up for him at the end, because it was almost like, oh, well, game on kind of thing. And I thought, oh, this is going to be quite fun. Whereas in this season, what did we learn? We learned that, his wife committed suicide. He was an evil bastard because he tried to upload James Delos' consciousness, even though that wasn't something that was supposed to happen. He was just kind of stringing him along. And then his daughter comes along who was amazing
and beautiful.
Just wanted to almost reconnect. He killed her. He basically killed her. And then at the end, we don't even know if he's real or not. We think he's probably a robot. That is absolutely fucking crazy. Like that's not an arc. That's not an arc that someone's gone through. That's not something that you can relate to. Like that. And that was a character that I was kind of almost rooting for to a certain extent, because in the first season when it was when he was younger, you felt like you were with him on that journey.
Right.
Oh, it was so frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, if the narrative in season 2 was, I think the big narrative I kept trying to latch onto was humans, we want to be immortal, right? Like the one that, like, humans, we can't understand that space goes on forever. Our brain is designed to not, like, your brain at one point will loop back on itself and you start back at the beginning of your thought. Like, we can't understand that space goes on forever. We also have a hard time understanding and dealing with our mortality, and part of that is what makes us human. So if the narrative was humans are afraid to die and want to be immortal, but robots who are immortal truly want to know what it's like to die because living forever and living in these loops is pain. If the two want to switch places, if that was the main narrative, they completely fucking broke that by contradicting themselves and destroying that on top of itself. So even if that was the narrative, there was no clear resolve. There was no working that problem out. And we never once really got to see a character meet their goal or get close to their goal, or a character go, oh my God, I'm a human that's been wanting to live forever. Now I just want to die. Or a robot that's like, oh my God, I'm getting ready to die and I don't want to. I'm afraid. I had immortality. Like, we never saw a good conflict in there. I mean, probably the best that it got was when Teddy realized that his programming wouldn't let him hurt Dolores. So the only way that he could hurt her within his programming was to commit suicide. And so he sacrificed himself to do what he couldn't do to her. That's about the biggest win that we got.
Yeah, the Teddy thing was probably the only good aspect of it, and you felt like that was almost like a bit of a classic love story, I guess. But he was ultimately destined to just be like a crazy pawn in like the Dolores story, which was I felt like it wasn't as heartbreaking because he's a robot, and it's just hard to. I just found it really quite hard to care, and the way that they kind of switched him up as well. I just wasn't as bothered. It's a shame because all of these people are amazing actors. They're absolutely amazing actors, and
I mean,
they just feel like they're being wasted.
I feel like, a couple of feelings that I have as we wrap up the end of our episode today. I feel like we've talked about this narrative before. Of you have basically an unlimited amount of time to make your first album. You have an unlimited amount of time to dream up your first season. You dream about it, you go on meetings, you get maybe a pilot greenlit, or people approve the script but they want to see more. So you have an unlimited amount of time to make that first project. But then when that gets picked up for season 2, you have a very limited amount of time to tell that story the second time. And we've used Flight of the Conchords several times where those two guys had like their whole childhood to write that first season. That was all of their friendship and jokes poured into 10 brilliant episodes. Then when they had to do that 8 months later, they're like, we can't do this. WestWorld suffered from that same creative restraint, which is kind of one of the problems of TV. So they did pick it up for a third season. They did that early. There's probably a couple of executives that are regretting that decision right now. They are saying that it's going to probably come back 2020, take a year off, regroup, get the finances in order, and try to find a way to tell the story small. TV, I think that rise of really great TV that we are on, it's just crumbling.